I'd been trapped at the clinic pulling a graveyard shift like the one where the hours all blur together until the light in the sky outside the windows begins to brighten once more, signaling the end of the shift because it's been hours since the last one went home, and by the time I finally punched out, the streets were empty apart from the occasional delivery truck rumbling through the thickening fog. I drove home in a daze, windows open to allow the chill air to keep my eyes from closing at the wheel. The radio turned off because even the quiet talk shows sounded like too much after 12 hours of beeps and voices. My street appeared as it always did, the quiet cul-de-sac where all the houses were the same, neat lawns and porch lights burning all night like they were waiting for someone to come home. And sure enough, he was back, my next-door neighbor Mark, standing just beyond the edge of his garage under the bright light he'd strung up out back, his hands in his pockets as if he'd been listening for the sound of my engine down the street. It took him a moment to wave. Otherwise, he stood there in the light, his eyes fixed right at the road as if he'd been waiting for the sound of my engine in particular. "Late again," he said. Not quite a question, but a statement he'd made many times before. His voice carried well in the quiet air, low and smooth, like it always was. I stepped out into the night, slinging the bag over my shoulder, giving him the bare minimum of acknowledgement, a nod, a grunt of, "Yeah, busy night." He nodded back, tilting his head a fraction of a degree to study me like he often did, like he was taking inventory of just how worn out I looked. "You should try to get some rest. Looks like it's getting to you." I grunted a reply that I was planning on it, then turned towards the entrance of my apartment, keys already in hand. He didn't follow me out, but I could feel the weight of his eyes on the back of me the entire way up the walk. I flicked on the light in the hallway, dropping my bag by the coat tree before slamming the entrance shut. It didn't quite close properly at first, swinging back a hair like the strike plate had shifted again, but I pushed it hard to get the deadbolt to engage. The apartment was chilly, the air conditioning low to cut down on the electric bill, but the faint scent of what I'd cooked 3 nights before still lingered in the kitchen. I stood there for a moment in the entrance hall, listening to the silence before I noticed the mail already sitting on the table by the entrance. Not just in the slot, but separated out, the bills neatly piled together, the junk mail separated out and creased like it had been pawed through for coupons or whatever. I hadn't checked it that morning. I'd left for work early and forgotten. The envelopes didn't feel warm from being out in the sun, but they didn't feel cold from sitting out overnight either. I picked up the top one, turned it over. No message, no signature, just my name and address in the usual typed font. Outside, I could hear the sound of Mark rolling down the garage door. Then silence. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe the carrier had delivered it during the day. Perhaps I was too tired to recall picking it up myself. The idea lodged in my mind, a small and sharp point that refused to slide away as I made my way into the house. That was the beginning. The following night, I came home around the same time, fog even thicker and streetlights haloed in it. And Mark was there again, this time out in his mailbox area, as if he was checking for something that obviously wasn't coming at 2 in the morning. He looked up as my headlights hit his yard and waved in the same way. "Everything go all right at the clinic?" he asked as soon as I got out of the car. I was surprised he remembered where I worked. It was something I'd only told him once when he asked why I kept such strange hours. "Fine," I said curtly and turned to go inside. "Just tired." He nodded as if he understood and then added, "If you ever need someone to hang out at the place while you're working late hours, just let me know. I'm usually awake anyway." I thanked him grudgingly and got inside and made sure the door was locked this time and turned the knob twice to check. But as soon as I turned to put my lunchbox in the sink in the kitchen, it was spotless. No crumbs from the toast I'd made that morning, no coffee ring on the cutting board. The lemony scent from the cleaner was still in the air. It hadn't yet worn off. I stood there in the kitchen and wondered if I'd cleaned it before going out. I hadn't. My heart didn't beat fast or anything. It just pounded harder as if it was working harder to push blood through my veins. The back door was locked. The windows were locked. There was no evidence of breaking and entering or anything taken. Just the house was clean as if someone came in and spent 10 minutes making it look nice and then left without taking anything. That night I didn't sleep well. Laid on the couch and stared at the ceiling and listened for the sound of footsteps on the gravel path between our houses. There weren't any. but the trash cans were already rolled back in against the garage wall the next morning, lids closed, although it was not yet trash day. The small things just started piling on top of that, each of them so small that it was laughable to think about them, and yet impossible to avoid once I noticed them. My paper would be laid out on the porch open to the local news, with an article about hospital shortages or flu outbreaks circled in soft pencil, but not signed, just a mark as if to draw attention to it. My garden hose, which I always left loosely coiled by the spigot, would be wound tight when I next went outside. One day I came home from work early and caught Mark standing in my driveway, rag in hand, cleaning bird droppings from the side of my car. He straightened when he saw me and gave that easy, friendly smile. Figured I'd clean it off before it dried on. No problem. I looked at him for a moment longer than I should have, then thanked him grittily and went inside without saying anything else to him. That night I got a text from his number, for the first time in a long time. "Your car is looking better. Let me know if there's anything else that needs to be taken care of." I didn't answer it. I started parking at the other end of the street and walking the last block so I could come at the house from an angle that let me see both our properties before I decided to go inside. He adjusted to that, of course. If I was late, he was watering plants that didn't need watering. If I left early, his lights were on just as I was pulling out of the driveway. Right on schedule. The texts came, always helpful, always at just the right moment. "Storm coming, you should probably shut your windows. Noticed that the clinic parking lot was full again. Hope you're not having a bad day." How did he know that the clinic was full? He didn't work there. I blocked his number eventually, but new ones popped up with different area codes but the same voice. "Just checking in. You seemed a little off last night." I stopped answering them altogether. Winter made everything seem closer, the cold pressing the houses together, the short days shrinking the world to the cul-de-sac and the two properties side by side. My daughter came for a weekend visit, and for a couple of days, the house seemed like it used to. Her music blaring too loud, dishes stacked high in the sink, her laughter ringing off walls that seemed too empty. But Mark was there on the fringes. When we walked to get the mail together, he was out front raking leaves that barely needed raking, stopping to wave at her directly, calling her by name despite my not ever introducing them. Later that night, a small box turned up on my doorstep. Homemade cookies wrapped in foil, a tag that said, "For the kiddo and her mom, happy holidays." I threw them out without trying one. My daughter left too soon. She hugged me at the door, promised to call soon, and drove off with her mom. The house was silent once more, and later that night, a power outage hit due to an ice storm. I sat in darkness, wrapped in a blanket, and shining my cell phone light on whatever needed illuminating, listening to branches tapping my roof. At about 11, a tentative rap came on my door. Mark, carrying a battery-powered lantern. "Got a generator running if you want to charge anything," he said. "Hate thinking of you sitting there cold." I thanked him through the door without opening it. He stood there a moment, then turned and left. When power came on at dawn, I spotted new footprints in the thin layer of snow on the side of my house, curving round to my back windows before cutting over to his property. I put cameras up next, cheap ones from the hardware store. I wired them to my phone so I could check them at work. The first notification arrived at 3:17 a.m., motion detected on the porch. I pulled up the app and saw Mark out there in the darkness, staring right at the camera for what felt like a long moment before he set down a potted plant and a bundle of herbs with a card I couldn't read from where I was. He turned and walked away nonchalantly, palms shoved deep into his pockets. I didn't go out for the plant. Let it sit there until it frosted and died. Pictures began to appear after that. One slid under my door of me getting ready for work that day. The timestamp was visible. Another arrived in my mailbox. A photo of me asleep on my couch taken from inside my apartment through my kitchen. I'd been sleeping with my mouth open. I called the police. They listened to my account and reviewed my pictures. Without any sign of tampering with my doors and windows, without any broken glass, they said it was difficult to pursue. "You try talking to him," one of them said. "Sometimes people draw boundaries without realizing." I did. I knocked on his door one afternoon, held my ground. "I want you to stop. The cleaning, the gifts. The fact that you come onto my property. All of it." He looked at me as if I'd surprised him, invited me in for coffee. I refused. "I'm just trying to help," he said. "You're alone a lot. I thought you might like a little company." I left there shaking my head. Intrusions did not cease, only quieted, becoming more subtle and cautious. Laundry folded that I had left in the dryer when it was done. Food delivered that matched my own ordering list. A new furnace filter, with a receipt for it found in my trash, proof that he had purchased it for me. The cameras began to malfunction too, with blackouts at the very moments of intrusion recorded in the video feed. My journal expanded page after page with dates, times, descriptions, and copied messages sent from throwaway numbers. My work began to suffer, with outbursts at co-workers, forgetting key facts about patients, and a spate of sick days taken at work. Friends asked me what was wrong, and I told them burnout. But it was not that. It was the house next door. The man living there, and how he had turned the very act of neighborhood proximity into something that was crushing me. He did not yell at me, did not menace me, did not do a single thing that the cops could take action against. He simply remained near, too near, with a constant readiness to lend a hand, to watch over me, to wait for the exact moment when I might finally need him. One night, in late January, I got home from work, which had dragged on with a line of customers coming in for everything from antibiotics to Band-Aids, and some poor kid with a broken arm that took an eternity to cast, to find our front door slightly ajar, not open, just enough so that it hadn't fully latched. The cold air had swirled in, frosting the hallway. I entered slowly, lights already on inside. All of them, living room, kitchen, hallway, even the bathroom vanity. I hadn't left them that way. My heart thumped in a solid, pounding rhythm as I entered, closing the door behind me, locking it with 3 turns of the deadbolt. The house smelled of fresh brewed coffee. A pot sat on the kitchen counter, hot, with steam wafting from the carafe, 2 cups beside it, one mine, one not. Steam rose from both. I stared at them, at the second mug, which was full, with a spoon laid across it, as if someone had stirred it, waiting. I didn't touch anything. Made my way around the house, room by room, bed made with hospital corners I never bothered to make, pillows fluffed, blanket smoothed at the foot, bathroom towel refolded, toothpaste cap screwed tightly back on. In my bedroom, my work scrubs hung pressed, not crumpled in the hamper, just like I'd left them. A glass of water with a slice of fresh lemon in it, melted condensation already beating on the glass, on my nightstand. No note, no sign of disarray, just careful attention, improved spaces, an absence that left these tiny traces behind. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, holding my phone, my thumb hovering over the non-emergency number once more. What could I say to them this time? The door is unlocked because I forgot to lock it when I came in. The lights are on because I left them on from last night. The coffee is made because someone made it for me. They'd ask me all the same questions, take all the same notes, make all the same recommendations, change locks, get a restraining order, move if it becomes a problem. I already changed the locks. The restraining order is a joke without hard evidence. I stayed up all night, lights blazing, knife from the kitchen block on my nightstand. When dawn finally came, gray and weak in the sky, I called in sick for the first time in a whole month, passed the day replacing all my locks once again, adding chain bolts to all of them, installing a second deadbolt on my back door. Mark's truck was gone all day, which surprised me. It's not common for it to be out of my sight for so long. When he came home in the late afternoon, he didn't emerge to say hi. He simply went inside, lights blazing, curtains drawn. No text message, no knock on my door. Silence from next door is louder than all of it combined. The silence lasted for 3 days. Then the pictures began again, slipped under the door at night, one every few nights. Me in the kitchen cooking dinner, back to the camera. Me on the couch reading, head bent. Me asleep once again, this time from the hallway shot. All printed at home, corners slightly curled, ink fresh. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom, took up residence on the couch where I could keep an eye on the front door. Cameras recorded nothing new. Action was skipped in the crucial moments, as if time itself was paused or power waned just enough. I began mixing up my routine, taking different shifts when I could, showing up at odd hours, parking blocks away and entering through the back fence line. Still, he always seemed to know. A message from a new number. "You've started avoiding the driveway too. Good call, but you still look tired." I deleted it, blocked it, repeated. It took a while for spring to arrive, rain soaks that turned lawns green and gravel between houses into mud. Then, one afternoon after a much-needed day off, I came home to find that someone had detail-washed, waxed, shined tires, and vacuumed my interior. And left without a note. But with the scent of wax in my interior when I opened the door. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the dashboard, which sparkled too much, too immaculately. That night I called Sarah, a college friend from nursing school who'd relocated to Sacramento. Told her about mail, about cleaning, photos, coffee, the gradual creep. She listened without interrupting, then quietly added, "That's stalking. That's not being a good neighbor. You need to start documenting more, get an attorney, maybe move." I laughed, bitter, because I'd have to give up the only thing that had stayed stable after the divorce, the house itself. She didn't argue further, just told me to save the journal, take screenshots, save whatever I could. I did. The file expanded, photos scanned in, dates included, messages saved, videos cut. But the cops believed in coincidence, in pattern without proof of a crime. But in the summer, the warmth forced everything down, air thick, nights muggy. I slept little, always startled by creaks, cars driving down the cul-de-sac. Mark stopped with the obvious signs. No more flowers, no more groceries, but he stuck around. Lights on when I had them off, curtains rustling as I passed in front of my windows. One night I got home late and discovered the front door unlocked, house cooled from AC blowing full blast. I never turned it up high. A dinner waited in my house, plate covered, still warm, pasta from the Italian place in town, receipt lying beside it indicating cash payment, timestamp an hour prior. I looked at it, fork in hand, and took it all outside to dump in his trash bin, lid slamming hard enough to hear in the next house. But no response from there either. Lights still on. I returned inside, locked everything twice, sat in darkness with the knife. This went on for months, erosion, slow and steady. I went through the motions. I worked, but the fire was out. People at the office commented on the weight loss, the circles, and asked if I was all right. I said yes, always yes. My daughter came around less. I didn't want her around it. My friends drifted and I stopped answering the phone. The house next door loomed larger every day, its windows staring at me, and the familiarity of Mark's routine a reflection of mine. My neighbor never spoke to me again about that one conversation, if one could even call it that. Never needed to, for that matter. He'd already driven the point home, that he was there, always there, waiting for the moment when I wasn't. And the longer it dragged on, the more I found myself wondering if the horror wasn't the incursions, but the way that he'd simply become a part of the background. Next door, smiling as I went by, silently waiting when I wasn't, and offering help when and how I didn't ask for it, and observing when and how I couldn't prove it. My home was no longer mine, and it was ours, regardless of how I felt about it. Every night, when I pulled into the driveway and saw the porch light on, waiting patiently as ever, I knew that he was still right there, my neighbor, still being the same thing that he'd always been, perfectly, silently, irretrievably close. I'd been out longer than intended that night, walking through the deserted streets of Tacoma under the perpetual mist that never fully materialized into rain, that kind that soaks through your jacket without your realizing it until your skin is numb with cold. The sounds of the city thrummed late, the hum of traffic on the interstate mixing with the occasional bark of a dog or roar of a train crossing the bridge, and I'd taken the long way back from the corner store, bag of junk food in hand, trying to clear my head from the fog of the day. My apartment complex stood familiar at the end of the block, low-slung and weathered with its chain-link fence and blinking security lights, and I'd caught sight of the new guy from next door hovering around the mailboxes, cigarette glowing bright orange in the dark, his face half hidden in shadow as he nodded in my direction. "Tough night out there?" he'd called out, voice flat across the gravel. I'd stopped, shifting the bag to my other hand. Just the usual damp. You? He shrugged, exhaling a streamer of smoke into the mist. Couldn't sit inside. Needed fresh air. I'd given him a brief wave and continued up to my apartment, wood creaking underfoot, unlocking the door with its familiar scrape of key and lock. Inside, the place was quiet. The hall light I'd left on casting shadows, but the door didn't fully close, hanging back a fraction like the lock had loosened, and I'd had to put my shoulder into it for the deadbolt to click. The smell of takeout from earlier still clung, and I'd placed the bag on the counter, flipping on the kitchen light, when the music began drifting through the shared wall from his side. Quiet at first, a melody from an old ballad that I hadn't thought about in years, tugging at something deep. The first couple of days, nothing much registered besides the usual routine. My alarm clock blasting at the crack of dawn, coffee searing my tongue while I shaved in the foggy mirror, and the commute to the warehouse, where I spent the day scanning barcodes and stacking boxes beneath harsh lights that gave everything a tired, washed-out look, co-workers yapping about games and weekend plans while I kept my head down and my trap shut. Occasionally, I'd spot the new kid around, but that was it. Out the door at the same time I went to work, heading for an old gray sedan that was always parked crooked in the spot next to mine, backpack slung over one shoulder, and his face was always turned the other way, as if he was trying to avoid cameras, eye contact. And both, for that matter. No one else in the complex seemed to give the kid the time of day. The usual hello and chit-chat went right over his head, people walking on by as if he were part of the background, and he did the same, never stopping, never saying a thing. Sounded about right for the place anyway. People keep to themselves around here, wave if you catch 'em at the mailboxes, but nobody digs deep. Then the noises started, around day 4 or 5, and at first they were just faint. Muffled slaps, sounds of furniture being moved, boxes scraping across floors, the sort of thing you might expect from someone moving in. I didn't give it much mind, too, beat to care, just cranked up the TV and let the cop procedural drone on while I ate cold pizza straight from the container. But then the music came through the wall. I was washing a plate in the sink, water piping hot, when the first sounds came in, muffled but strong enough to make me freeze. It was Unchained Melody, the Righteous Brothers cover my dad used to play on Sunday afternoons when he thought he was alone, the one that always made him go quiet and fix his gaze out the window like he was trying to remember something he couldn't quite put into words. The sound came flooding back, memories of afternoons in the old house, the scent of coffee and bacon, his voice singing along off-key while my mom tried not to notice the sheen in his eyes. I stood there, water dripping onto the floor, heart constricted, the plate slipping from my fingers and clattering against the stainless steel, jolting me back to the present. The song played once, then trailed off, but started up again maybe 20 minutes later, same volume, same gentle tug. It started to feel almost gentle, almost like a ray of sunlight in the gray drab of the days, reminding me of the good times without the usual pang of sorrow that came with thinking of my parents. I listened, finished up the cleanup, settled onto the couch with the TV low, and the song cycled through once more as the sun set, 3 times altogether before bed, right about the time I usually turned in for the night. Weird timing maybe, but I've always been a weird girl myself with habits of my own, leaving the porch light on, the thermostat set to 68 regardless of the time of year, so who was I to complain? But it didn't last. The timing got too specific, kicking in the instant I entered the room and dropped my keys, pausing when I stepped out onto the balcony for some fresh air, picking right back up the moment I settled back inside. The warmth turned to nausea, the melody becoming something that felt less like memory and more like something that was being played at me. The way the notes held on the high points of the chorus making my skin crawl. The nights stretched out, the loops slowing down, scratches now apparent in the recording that sounded like a scratchy old vinyl record, the voice of the singer warping slightly on the edges, and underneath it all other sounds began to seep through, short, harsh breaths that weren't a part of the song, a wet smack that sounded like something heavy falling on carpet, a muffled cry that cut off short. I caught myself mid-sip of beer, ears cocked, telling myself it was a TV in the next room, maybe a horror movie with the sound turned up, but the pounding was too perfectly in time with the pauses in the song, the gasps hitting right on the crest of the chorus. One night after a late shift that had included a lot of overtime that I didn't need, I collapsed onto the couch with a pizza left to get cold on the coffee table, flipping through channels to get past the quiet, and the song kicked in right on time. But this time it was warped, the beat slowing down, the notes bending as if the record was melting in a hot sun, and underneath it all a sound that wasn't a part of the song. A harsh gasp, cut short by a heavy thud that echoed wetly through the wall, then silence that swallowed it whole until the song looped through again to normal. I caught myself mid-bite, fork hovering, trying to hear if it happened again, but the song just kept on going, and when it finally ended for the third night in a row, the room fell silent. No shuffling, no footsteps, just the hum of my fridge kicking on. I sat there long after, reliving it in my head, convincing myself it was a movie he was watching. Speakers turned up weird, or my ears were tricked by exhaustion, but the chill lingered deep, keeping me awake with my eyes on the ceiling, my head racing with possibilities I didn't want to consider, the wall between us seeming thinner than ever, like it might collapse at any second. I refused to think about it the next day, lost in work where the hum of machinery obliterated all else, bantering with the guys during break about nothing to distract myself, but home beckoned me back inevitably, and the music waited, beginning as I unlocked the door, normal at first but warping again with the second iteration. That gasp louder, then the thud and gurgle that sounded all too real and all too close, cutting my appetite as I paced the kitchen, TV blaring to max but still managing to hear it seep through. Sleep came fitfully, dreams of Grandma's records skipping over screams that weren't hers, and come morning, I was a wreck, coffee doing little to clear my head. The cycle continued for days, the anomalies escalating, the hidden voices changing, gasps to whimpers, thuds with cracks like shattering bone, all hidden in the melody but loud enough to make my flesh creep, and I found myself spending more and more time out, driving aimlessly after work, or parked in the lot with the engine idling, putting off the moment when I had to return home, and the music would be waiting. One night, around 1 a.m., unable to sleep with the memories echoing through my brain, I went out for some fresh air, wandering down to my car for the pack of smokes I'd stuck in the glove compartment, and that's when I saw him, hunched in the corner of the parking lot beneath the flickering sodium light, dragging a heavy black bag across the gravel, plastic scratching roughly, a dark trail behind it that shone wetly in the faint illumination, thick and syrupy like oil or something worse. He hauled it in fits, the bag swinging heavy, shaped like a person in the way it slumped, and I stood frozen by my own door, winded, watching as he hauled it toward the dumpster, the squelching sound of whatever it was leaking, mingling with the drag, my mind screaming for me to flee but legs locked, dizziness rising until I stumbled back against the railing, the sound clanging loud. He caught himself mid-pull, his head turning slowly toward the sound, his eyes locking with mine through the darkness, fixed and unblinking for what felt like an eternity before I spun and sprinted inside, bolting the chain down as I leaned against the door, my heart pounding as I envisioned those eyes burning behind my shut lids. I got to the hallway stumbling, legs weak as I sprinted for my door, patting pockets frantically for keys, panic rising with their absence, must have dropped in the fall, and seeing them glinting halfway down the hall, I sprinted back, snatching them with a look to the car where he'd disappeared, nowhere to be found in the seat or around it, just empty air. Racing back, I struggled the key in, slammed the door shut, locked every lock and chain, gasping for air as the knocking began immediately. Thudding fists on the wood, rattling the doorknob, shaking the whole room like thunder in my chest. No more waiting, I knew then, rummaging for my phone while the knocking escalated. But pulling it out showed the screen blacked out from the day's distractions, and I hastened to the bedroom outlet, jamming it in with shaking fingers. The knocking stopping abruptly as the music pulsed louder than ever before, walls shuddering with the twisted melody, loops speeding up into a droning shriek, punctuated by screams rising to a piercing crescendo, my own tears mingling with the sound as I waited for the phone to vibrate back to life, dialing 911 the instant it lit up. The voice of the operator interrupted smoothly, asking for information, but panic flooded me, a babble of meaningless sounds, a scream for help, a plea for hurry. He's here, he's trying to get in, the sound distorting with static as the knocking began again all around me, walls thudding like multiple fists, music a deafening roar until my head ached, phone flying from my fingers, sliding across the floor out of reach. I curled up fetal, knees to chest, nails clawing scalp hair as the madness raged around me, thoughts shattering until silence fell, then new knocking, the heavy sound of fists on wood, shouting of, "Police, open up!" A rush of relief flooded me as I struggled for the door, babbling out the explanation, pointing to room 207. "He's in there, please." A cop staying with me reassuringly while others hammered on his door, shouting of "Open up!" met with silence before they broke in, warning calls before they stormed in with guns drawn. They spilled out a few minutes later, empty, furnitureless, dust thick with layers of disuse, the landlord verifying it had been vacant for months with no record of a renter. This was last week. Music resumed tonight, scratching with it, and I don't know what to do, writing this on a borrowed computer at the library because it's not safe at home anymore. The days following the police visit became a blur of questions about my health from coworkers, about how I was jumping at every sound, the sound of the tools clanging like the thuds in my mind. But I wrote it off as a bug making the rounds, not wanting to have to explain the inexplicable. The landlord changed the locks on 207, posted a notice in the window with a note that said, "Available," and the van was gone from the parking lot as if it had never been there at all, only the streak I'd seen in the rain remaining in my mind. I slept with the lights on, knife beneath the pillow, checking the peephole every hour, but all was quiet. No music playing, no scratching sounds, but only the regular building noises I'd grown accustomed to before, but now made my teeth ache. Friends I'd not spoken to in months reached out via text to check in, and I lied, said I was fine, busy, but the nights alone made every little thing seem magnified, the walls seeming to breathe at times, shadows dancing in the corners of my vision. But the next morning, the mail came under my door in a plain envelope with no stamp in it. The note was written in neat but unfamiliar handwriting. "Miss the song? It'll play soon." The cold was immediate in my bones like before, but I destroyed it in the sink basin, watching the flames reduce it to ash. Work was a nightmare that day, mind drifting back to the empty apartment, wondering if perhaps I'd missed something. A hidden space, perhaps a resident hidden away somewhere in the building. And I saw him again while driving home from work. The man in the hooded sweatshirt by the side of the road, the grin flashing briefly in the headlights before I swerved to avoid him out of reflex despite knowing he was only air. Home was where the music was waiting in the silence at first, but growing in intensity the longer I was in the door locking it behind me. The distortion growing in the gasps and thuds in the scratches in the drywall like claws digging in once more. And I was shaking in the dark with the phone in one hand to hit 911, but knowing it would be empty once again. Weeks dragged on, music intermittent but always set to my lowest, after lousy shifts, during storms that shook window panes, loops twisting to warped versions of terrors nested inside, screams pleading now, words slurred but sounding like my name murmured softly, thuds beating like heartbeats slowing to a stop. I mixed up my schedules, stayed at a motel twice, but every time I came back, notes were left. "Where'd you go? Missed you." And the van parked erratically in visitor slots, empty but engines warm, as if he'd just stepped out. The police followed up once, no leads, counseled me on stress management, but I'd set up a cam and caught glimpses. Shadow at the door delivering envelopes, features hidden behind a hoodie that fit his build. Fear mounted steadily, appetite vanished. Sleep a luxury, jobs firing me for no shows, daughter calling worriedly from out of state. Myself reassuring her I'd come soon, but knowing I'd never make it. Held back by the allure of the wall, music beckoning me to return. Last night it pounded to its fullest volume, scratching escalating to gouges audible through splintering sounds, screams audible as if right next to me, and when I pounded back frantically, silence dropped, but a note slipped underneath. Soon. I'm here now, library shutting soon, music beckoning back home, and I understand that this will be my last night, him breaking through, but typing this out may mean that somebody will hear, act before it's too late. But these break-ins didn't stop at the messages and glimpses. They insinuated themselves deeper, weaving themselves into the fabric of ordinary life to leave me wondering what was real and what my frazzled nerves were conjuring up. One afternoon, with rain lashing against the windows, I dozed on the couch in mid-afternoon for the first time in weeks, finally worn down by exhaustion. only to wake to find myself listening to music playing softly in my own apartment. Not from the neighboring one, but from my own phone sitting on the coffee table. The screen glowing with an unfamiliar icon streaming the mangled melody, screams woven in faint but increasing intensity. I grabbed it, trying to silence it, but the volume control stuck high, thuds resonating in my hand as if whatever it held was trying to get out, and when I finally turned it off, the silence pounded in my ears, my own face reflected back in the black screen with eyes wide and vacant. I smashed it that evening, purchased a new burner phone the next day, but it wasn't long before it got tracked down to me as well. Phone calls from blocked numbers playing back the melody when I answered, gasps rising to pleas that sounded eerily like my daughter's voice begging for help before going silent. The scratching escalated beyond nighttime hours, audible in daylight patterns of them in Morse code I couldn't read but seemed to sense in advance, the wall warming up under my hand when I pressed it flat against it, as if someone breathed on the other side. I covered up holes in walls with tape, blocked up doors with towels, but these sounds seeped in, and so did visions of bag dragging, first in the lot but also on my way to the market. This figure emerging from alley corners hauling the sodden bag, the streak growing redder with each sighting, closer, closer, with an air thick with copper that turned my guts to acid. The police wrote off these new complaints as hallucinations from lack of sleep, handed me pills I flushed down the toilet, loath to muffle the edge of awareness that kept me sharp. The van began parking in my spot when I was out, engine revving, exhaust smoking like signal fires. And when I came back, I'd find tiny differences in the apartment. Cabinet doors open, fridge light blinking, a strand of hair not mine lying in my bed, coarse and gray like his. My dreams seeped into reality, his face grinning in cracks in the wall that weren't there before, his voice harmonizing in time with song lyrics changed to call my name, promises of being together soon. I barricaded myself in by stacking furniture against the door last week, but the knocking resumed, softer, insistent, like knuckles tapping, patiently, and tonight, while I type this, in the library where everyone else is gone, except for the clerk who gives me a nervous glance, I feel his tune drifting in my ears, scratches in my brain, because I know that home is waiting, where he is in it too, where the wall is finally down, where my bag is waiting for me. Get me if you are reading this, because it isn't paranoia, it's almost over. I'd been living in that dingy apartment on Elm Street for what seemed like an eternity, long enough that I'd tuned out the stains on the carpet and the dripping faucet no matter how hard I turned it off. The apartment building was one of those forgotten things in the quiet part of town, where the price to live there remained low simply because no one bothered to fix the peeling wallpaper or replace the flickering bulbs in the hallway, and tenants drifted in and out without so much as a hello in the laundry room if you were unlucky enough to cross paths with them. I'd taken my apartment on the third floor to match my increasingly lonely lifestyle following the split, waking when I pleased, staring at the ceiling tiles until I got hungry enough to drag myself out of bed, scrounging for whatever bits of food I'd managed to leave in the apartment, writing freelance pieces on my laptop until my eyes were sore, taking a turn around the block for some fresh air, returning home, repeating. No particular rhythm to it, no particular contacts, just enough to keep me afloat without requiring all that much. The apartment directly below mine, 202, had been vacant since the tenants split without paying their rent months prior, leaving behind just a hint of dampness that wafted up every now and again. But mostly it was quiet, a buffer zone that allowed me to pace or carry on conversations with myself without worrying about being overheard. I'd shuffled home from an uneventful prowl around downtown one gray day, keys jingling in my pocket, paused in front of my door when I heard activity in 202, footsteps pacing across the floor, the soft thud of a drawer being opened and shut, the soft turn of a lamp being turned on. A new tenant. No moving vans in the hallway, no moving truck parked out in front, just activity in an apartment that had been unoccupied for months, and I'd unlocked my own door. Heard the soft hum of a song I'd been carrying in my head all day, the same song I'd been humming to myself on my way home. The similarities began innocently enough, things that happened that I could have written off as quirks of thin walls in an old building like this one. I'd line up a playlist on my computer while checking emails, some indie tracks that I'd unearthed from a forgotten streaming playlist, and sure enough, these same tracks would drift up from downstairs, Same playlist, same skips in the Wi-Fi that had lagged on my end. I stopped playing music once, just to see, and the music below stopped too, only starting back up when I hit play again. Thin walls, I thought, sound traveling strangely upward for some reason. The next night, I binge-watched an episode of that offbeat documentary series I'd been making my way through, volume low so I wouldn't disturb anyone. When midway through, the voice of the narrator echoed faintly back from 202, same episode, same part, laughter from the interviewees in perfect sync. I muted the screen. Silence below. Unmuted. Picked right back up where I'd left off. I sat there staring at the floor, a shiver tracing its way along my arms, but wrote it off for what it was. Probably just coincidence. Either this new guy in 202 had the same tastes, or just different streaming apps that had recommended the same things based on our own data input. I took to headphones for everything, turned off the TV, but then came the sense. I heated up a frozen meal, cheap curry with rice, that kind that came in a package with that specific spice mix I'd always picked. And sure enough, that same curry smell wafted through the vents, strong and identical, like someone had opened a package downstairs at exactly the same time. I cooked eggs for breakfast, over easy with a hit of hot sauce, when that sizzle and hot sauce smell filled the air below minutes after. It escalated these mirrors, so that I began to test them, took to buying an offbeat brand of tea that I'd never tried before, brewed a cup late at night, when sure enough, that same cup of tea smell wafted back up, mixing with mine. I told my sister about it during one of our sporadic calls. I'm out here, she's back east, so it's about once a month. And she laughed and said maybe I had a secret admirer listening in, or there was some crossed wire in the building for sound and scent alike. It wasn't funny to me any longer. I began to notice the tenants' patterns falling in line with mine. Footsteps kicking in when I got out of bed, a door creaking when I left for the market, lights turning on that I could see from my window when I turned mine on at night. I never caught a glimpse of them. I knocked once after a creepy overlap where my muffled phone argument with an overdue account payment echoed word for word from below, but there was no response, only a silence that felt like it was listening. The old couple across the hall, the ones who kept stray cats in the alleyway, just shrugged when I asked them casually if they'd met the new tenant of 202 yet. "Young guy, I reckon," the wife said. "Peculiar hours, doesn't go out much." I nodded and went back upstairs, but the feeling stuck with me, especially when the personalized touches began. I'd spritz my new perfume, that one with the wood note that I'd picked out on a whim last year, not a common scent, and I could smell it in the hall outside 202, fresh as if it had just been applied. I'd wash a batch of laundry with my common soap, hang it out to dry in the bathroom, and the scent of clean linens would waft up, same batch for batch. One night, I pulled out an old book from the shelf, a beat-up thriller that I hadn't cracked open in years, read through the pages aloud to fill the silence, and heard pages turning below, at the same pace as I turned them, a soft laugh at the same twist of the story that I'd just hit. The intrusions piled on top in thicker layers, to the point where it was difficult to distinguish between coincidence and intention. I came home from an unusual meeting with an ex-colleague, nothing more than coffee in a downtown cafe, and found my door handle sparkling clean, fingerprints eradicated, my key turning effortlessly as if it had been greased. The interior was filled with a whiff of the same coffee I'd drunk earlier from my cup in the cafe. Grounds in my garbage can that weren't my own, but similar in brand. My computer was open on my desk, screen lit to the same draft on an email message that I'd begun composing that morning but hadn't saved, phrasing altered in subtle ways, sentences reorganized for better effect than my own attempt. I shut it hastily and listened for my windows, locked. My closet was empty, under my bed was dust, but the alignments kept piling on. My groceries rearranged in my refrigerator, vegetables stacked neatly in rows, an expired bottle of milk discarded without my awareness. My clothes folded in my dresser cabinet, my socks matched just so, my dress shirts pressed lightly as if my intruder was honing her skills. I began locking my door twice and checking it obsessively, but the alignments kept coming. I considered ringing my sister for the third time in as many days and picked up my receiver to hear the dial tone humming in the background, and the same number dialed as if my intruder was eavesdropping on my thoughts, and my sister's voice responding weak and distant through the floor, even as my finger was pressing the last digit. I dropped the receiver and didn't ring her. The intruder's presence became bolder without ever appearing in the flesh. My favorite mug sparkling clean and placed in my cabinet for my morning cup and steam wafting through my bedroom as if it had already been done. My bed was made while I was out and about, my sheets tightly tucked in, and my pillow fluffed as if my intruder was emulating my habits. One day as I was out and about in the afternoon, I spilt some ink on a draft in my notebook and cursed in disgust and left it to dry, only to see it rewritten in my own handwriting but cleaner and corrected for errors and ideas extended in ways my draft hadn't considered. I tried to avoid the building as much as possible after that, worked on the park bench down the street or at the library if the weather permitted, but the allure to come back home was always there, and every time it came back to life, new echoes resurfaced. The sense of my meals made before I learned to cook, music I'd intended to play already playing softly in my brain. I rang on 202 once more one night, louder and insistent, but no one answered, though I could have sworn the door was warm to my touch, like a body beneath it. The elderly pair spotted me lingering and asked if I was okay. I muttered something about needing sugar, though they eyed me peculiarly, as if they knew something they shouldn't have known. That night, my voice came to me from below, not recorded, but live, reciting lines from a book I'd been reading in bed, turning pages to match mine, chuckling at points I'd found humorous, though a little harsher, a little more authentic. I slapped my book shut. Silence ceased below. I lay there drenched, phone clutched, weighing a call to 911. Though what would I say? My neighbor knows my life a little too well? Does it a little better? Sleep came fitfully, filled with visions of hands reaching through the floor to smooth my blankets and whisper corrections. The next day, my key wouldn't turn in my lock. I wiggled it, forced it, called my landlord, grumbling to follow me upstairs, took my key, tried it himself. "That's for 202, he eyed me, a clear accusation on his face. "You live on 3. I protested, though he guided me a floor lower, fit my key into 202's lock, turned easily, opened easily. And inside, my apartment exactly as I'd known it, though a cardboard cutout of my couch slumped slightly, a bookshelf painted by hand on wooden blocks, a fridge a box painted to resemble one, filled not just with paper products labeled to resemble my food, but my food itself on paper products, my walls adorned by my posters, though they'd been printed a little too bright, a little too vibrant, my bed made to an obsessive level, though flat as if no one slept there, my mirror above my chest-high dresser reflecting my room back to me, though every detail a little too sharp, a little too bright, my furniture made not just of wood, but wood so richly brown it seemed to glow. I backed out, stomach twisting, ran up to my floor. Key worked now, inside my place, disheveled as I'd left it, but a note on the table in my handwriting. Getting better every day. I didn't stick around after that. Grabbed a bag and moved in with a distant cousin who lived out of town. I told my job I needed a break for family reasons. The mimics were following me. Emails from clients complimenting changes I hadn't made, worded nicer. Phone calls from friends about conversations we'd never had, but I'm sure it was me, sounding more chipper. A text from my sister about a package I'd sent. I'd put my own writing on the label, with things she'd asked for but hadn't bought yet. I changed my number and my email account. The jingle began. A soft ringing sound like a custom notification I'd set up for myself once before but forgotten. Heard it from a stranger's phone at a grocery store, in a display ad for a bus, in the background of a conference call with my job. The cousin thinks I'm going crazy, needing a rest. I nod. I play along. I spot flashes of myself, a person in my coat at a coffee shop, turned away from me, standing up straighter than I do. A laugh that sounds like mine from another room, more confident, more distinct. I recognize it as coming, getting close, improving, ready to slide right into my place. And when it happens, nobody will realize I'm gone because it's going to be so good, so calm, so crisp. The version everyone wants. The jingle's loud enough that I can hear it inside my head even when I'm by myself. A signal that it's coming. I'm writing this from a computer at a library. I hope someone reads it before I'm just a memory, a fading echo. The doubt crept in more heavily after I left the apartment, gathering like dust that I couldn't shake. Every reflection in a mirror, a sense of being examined by something that wore my face, but not my eyes. I stayed with my cousin for a week, sleeping on the pull-out couch that dipped in the center, waking with every groan of his old house, thinking it was the sound of feet pacing beneath, synchronized with mine. My cousin asked questions at first. Why the sudden move? Why the packed bag as if I'd fled something? But I let it stay general, landlord problems, poor plumbing, and he let it drop when I didn't have anything more to say. Emails from the job accumulated. Clients pleased with pieces I'd sent but couldn't recall writing. Feedback on the polished tone and fresh ideas that were mine but better. Phrases I wished I'd written myself. I accessed the account from his computer, and the drafts were already revised. Times when I'd been asleep. Changes seamless, but unmistakable. My words, but better organized. Errors I'd missed, corrected. I reset the passwords, set up two-factor authentication, but the next day, more changes, signed with my name. My friends texted about plans we'd made, dinner next week, a movie I'd suggested, but I hadn't reached out. "You were great on the phone," one of them said. "More energetic than usual." I didn't call back. The jingle started playing everywhere, ringtone on the phone of a stranger walking down the street. Same ringtone I'd used for a brief period the year before, the radio playing an ad that resolved into the same notes, even the microwave dinging in my cousin's kitchen playing the same tune when I heated up leftovers. I avoided screens, going for walks, but caught glimpses, another person, same cut and same colors, turning the same way when they saw me from the pharmacy line. A person ordering coffee ahead of mine, phrasing the order the same way I would, but better, no stuttering. Then I moved to a motel, a cheap joint on the outskirts of town with weekly rates, pay only in cash, and no questions asked. I told my cousin it was a family emergency and promised to tell them later. The room reeked of stale smoke and bleach with a lousy mattress, but at least I didn't have to think about anyone living on the floor below. I bought myself a new computer and made new accounts, but those mimics tracked me down. Notice from the bank about money I didn't send, but had considered sending to charity. I had signed off on receipts via email. Posts from my page on social media. Pictures I had taken but not posted yet. Captions that were wittier and comments pouring in from people complimenting me on the new energy. I shut down the accounts altogether. That song was stuck in my head, an ad playing on a TV in the lobby of the motel with that song's refrain, and then calls from numbers I didn't recognize singing that song's refrain before I picked up. I picked up once, and I was talking to myself on the other side of the line, laughing softly and saying, "Getting closer." I hung up and broke that phone. I started having dreams of myself watching myself from down below, practicing movements and practicing smiles at a mirror that showed me a sharper reflection. I woke up drenched with sweat and checked the door to see that it was chained shut, but that sometimes I could turn the handle slowly from outside, as if someone was trying it to see if I was locked in. I saw him once, a tall man wearing my coat outside the window, his face like mine but chiseled, his eyes meeting mine and then drifting away as he walked off. Police? I didn't know what to tell them, that someone was living my life better? They just laughed and sent me to therapy. My cousin phoned from a new number and didn't use his voice. It was an altogether smoother voice and asked me if I was okay, and sounded like he cared but was just a little too perfect. I hung up on him. Now that song is stuck in my head, and I can feel when I'm done. I'm typing this from a booth at a diner, last of my money to buy coffee with, but I know that when I leave, it'll be waiting. Me, improved, ready to move on in. If you're reading this, check your echoes, your better shadows. They're coming for us all. Isolation went further in the motel, the walls closing in despite the open space, every car pulling in sounding like the footsteps leading to my door. I stopped eating real food, only vending machine fare if I was hungry enough, the pounds melting off, clothes loose like I was wearing someone else's skin. The TV was off after the second night because the news was playing. The announcer had my rhythm talking about a local story, words I'd considered using in a pitch but never sent. Changed the channel, commercial with the guy who looked like me, but his smile was more defined. Unplugged it. My walks became paranoia, faces in the crowd like mine, but with a firmer jawline, a steadier stare. One followed me 2 blocks in step with mine, turning the same way I did, disappearing when I turned to yell at them. Back in the motel room, Notes appeared under the door. Almost ready. It was my handwriting, but with neater loops. The maid knocked. It was my voice asking if I needed new towels. I didn't answer. The dreams changed. I was below teaching the copy. How to laugh naturally, how to type faster, how to correct the errors I hated in myself. Woke up to find my journal entries written out. The same thoughts, but clearer. The mistakes corrected. Threw it out. My cousin appeared out of nowhere. His haircut was like mine, his clothes similar, his speech honed. "You don't look so good," he said. "I can help." The eyes were off. Too knowing. I slammed the door shut, barricaded it. The ringtone was the jingle from his ringtone as he walked out. Clients stopped contacting. Emails about the work I'd never done being finished, payments made anyway. The banking app showed I'd logged in from unfamiliar computers. The balances slightly higher as if it was compensation. Friends messaged about the things I'd posted but didn't post, about how I was fine, better than ever. The copy was out in the world, living it better. The motel manager complained about the noise from my side of the door, about the voices late at night talking. It was someone else's voice. I checked out, slept in parks, in alleys. It was everywhere. Billboards with faces like mine, advertising with my improved smile. The ringtone was in the wind chimes, in the car horns, in the beat of my heart. It's in the diner now, across from me sipping coffee, eyes calm on me, the better version. Waiting to switch. These are my final words. Believe, check your reflections. They're already in the diner. It all unraveled quickly after the diner, the tune rising in my ears like an orchestra to crescendo, every sound in the world resolving into its melody, the clinking of forks, the hum of the coffee machine, the muffled voices of diners blending into the melody that had begun it all. I left money on the table, slipped out into the alley behind, pounding heart, glancing back over my shoulder to see the figure rising from the booth, my height, my build, moving with an ease I never had, keeping pace because it knew how quickly, ran for blocks, burning lungs ducking into alleys, but it seemed to be in cahoots with the city, faces in windows looking like mine but honed, street signs labeling names I'd thought of in passing, cars blaring the tune in bursts. Found a payphone, called in to Police Anonymous, voice on the other end of the line sounding like mine answering, "How can I help?" Hung up. Continued on, took bus to edge of town, but the driver turned back with my eyes, smile too sharp. Got off early, walked through fields, but the wind was carrying the melody, leaves rustling in time. Slept rough under an overpass, woke to footsteps matching mine from above, shadow stretching long with my outline but standing up straight. It's in everything now, jobs I've applied for filled by me, friends posting photos of themselves with caption of us laughing harder, family calling wrong number thinking it's me, happier. The melody's in there, pulsing steadily to signal it's done. I write this from pilfered time on a library computer again, but the librarian has my face, watching quietly. It'll be over soon, me disappearing, it's slipping in seamlessly. Caution to others. Listen for echoes, the better you waiting. They spoil by improving, perfecting what you didn't. It's too late for me. It's been months since I've been sitting on this, turning it around in my mind like a bad dream that refuses to be washed away, like a film that clings to your skin after a shower, making even the most mundane moments in the day have a slightly off, slightly rehearsed quality to them, like the whole world is staging a show just for me to notice that there is a script being followed. It's something that you wouldn't want to talk about, to your coworkers in the staff lounge, sipping lukewarm coffee while discussing lesson plans and recalcitrant students, to your neighbors who give friendly waves while walking their dogs in precision, crafted loops around the block, to Karen, who already watches me sometimes with that concerned professional intensity that she reserves for her patients who are reacting to treatment in ways that are, shall we say, less than optimal. Her eyes narrowing just a fraction when I stand there too long staring out the window or when I'm mid-conversation, like she's analyzing me without saying a word. It's something that feels like it could be dangerous if I were to put words to it, like I'm handing out a key to a room that's disintegrating around me, thread by thread, until there's nothing left but the unraveling. But keeping it inside is worse. That's when things start to get teeth, when things start to gnaw at the corners of every mundane day, until I'm afraid to look too closely at anything because I'm afraid that I'll see something lurking there that's something else altogether. But here it is, in its entirety, with as much detail as I can remember without my hands shaking so hard that I'm unable to see the words on the screen in front of me, without that voice creeping in that says maybe I should just hit that delete button too, get rid of this before someone finds it. I am Milton. I'm an English teacher in a district that's got most of its students more interested in their phones than in whatever point I'm trying to make about unreliable narrators, or how one image is enough to carry an entire story's weight. I thought this was the toughest part of my life, grading papers that never quite worked, trying to convince 16-year-olds that words can mean something when it seems like their attention span is measured in seconds. But I've come to realize the truth is something else entirely, something that weighs heavier with each passing week. That happened this summer, during my break. I had plans to finish the novel I've been promising myself and Karen for years, the one that would prove I had something worth saying beyond lectures. But instead, I ended up wondering if the foundation I stand on is as sound as I always thought it was. It started with a cigarette on the porch one night and a house down the hill that no longer felt like my house. Or it started with me. Maybe I was already coming apart at the seams, and the house just gave my fear something to grasp hold of, a focal point for the paranoia that had been building in the background all this time. The house next door has been a quiet one. Not a polite, cordial kind of quiet. Quiet like a room when a breathing stops, and then a presence swells up into a weight that presses against one's skin. Karen and I bought our house in 2018. It's a ranch-style house with a crooked mailbox that leans a little to the left and a rose bush that refuses to die no matter how much water it doesn't get. The house next door has a perfect white siding that doesn't ever get dingy or chipped, and windows that mirror the sky like it has no secrets at all, always spotless and blank. The last residents were an older couple who waved once a year if we happened to catch them outside and left their holiday decorations up until March. Their presence was a constant thrum in the background of our existence. Then, in early 2020, they left. The for sale sign stayed up for what felt like an eternity, collecting dust and spider webs, until one overcast afternoon, it just vanished. A moving truck pulled up one night while we slept, and its engine rumbled softly that I remembered from a dream, but by morning, it was gone. The house was empty and still, with curtains hanging limp in the windows and a faint light glowing in the porch. The stillness that clung to it was like a presence that swallowed up any noise that dared get too close. We figured that some other folks must have moved in. People often move without a fuss, especially in those early pandemic days when everyone was just trying to hole up. We never laid eyes on them. No one. No shadow crossing a window at just the right angle. The house's lights came on at dusk and off at dawn, but no one came out into the driveway or yard. The first thing I noticed was the mail. Our boxes sit side by side on the shared post at the curb, identical twins in rusty metal with our addresses stamped in fading black. Every day, a small stack of bills and catalogs for me, a little pile of junk mail with the occasional card from a cousin or aunt. Theirs was empty, the lid ajar as if expecting delivery of something that never showed up. I never saw a single letter, a single magazine, a single election brochure or coupon for pizzas that blanket the neighborhood like confetti. I mentioned it to Karen one morning over breakfast, coffee cup suspended mid-sip. She looked out the window and shrugged. Maybe they have a P.O. box. Maybe they're private. Maybe I was paying too much attention to a house that wasn't ours. I could feel the slight edge of annoyance in her voice when I was paying too much attention. And she was right. I let it go, but it bothered me, a slight aberration in the beat of the street like a clock ticking off key. And then came the sound. Not loud, not steady. Just a deep, regular thump-thump-thump that came through the wall at irregular intervals, humming through the drywall and into the frame of our bed. Not music, not footsteps. Too regular, too rhythmic, like a finger tapping on a table to count off seconds. Only slower, deeper, like a finger belonging to a weightier body, one that's substantial and meaningful. It started at about 2 a.m., 3 nights a week, always to the same rhythm. 32 beats, a pause, 32 beats, a pause, and then nothing for a night or two, leaving the silence all the thicker for its absence. I leaned an ear against the wall once, felt the hum through my teeth, a vibration that made my jaw ache if I concentrated on it too long. Karen slept right through it, her breathing smooth and uninterrupted. I didn't tell her about it at first. Didn't want to seem like a man who spends his nights eavesdropping on walls, his imagination running wild on whatever might be on the other side. I began recording it. The notebook was always by the bedside, the cheap kind with the plastic binding that pinches your palm if you press it too hard. Date, time, number of beats, weather, status of the porch light in the neighboring house, on or off. After 6 weeks, the rhythm became clear. Always 32 beats. Always between 1:47 a.m. and 3:12 a.m. Always in the absolute silence of the street at these hours. No cars, no wind, no dogs barking in the distance. I Googled thumping at low frequency through wall and came up with hits about plumbing problems, HVAC failures, tinnitus from stress at the office, or what to do about the in-laws with restless leg syndrome or peculiar nocturnal behaviors. These didn't apply because the thumping was not random, but regular, like someone or something was counting out the seconds on the other side of the wall. I ordered a cheap decibel meter from an online retailer, something soundproofing hobbyists would use in a home recording studio. The decibel level never topped 18 decibels, too faint to be noticed by most people. But the needle spiked at exactly the moment I felt the thumping in the wall, like the needle was dancing in time with the thump. I showed the journal to Karen one Sunday morning over coffee, the book lying open between us like a reproach. She read it in silence, her eyes tracing the columns before closing it gently and telling me, "Milt, you're scaring yourself." She didn't say I was scaring her. The difference was important. It hung in the air like a sentence unspoken. I tried to resist. I moved the bed against the far wall. I dragged it across the floor with grunts of effort. I wore earplugs, the foam kind. They expand inside your ear canal until they muffle everything but your heartbeat. I listened to ocean waves crash through a speaker set up on my nightstand. The thump discovered me regardless, through my mattress, through my floor, through my head, as if it were calibrated to my personal frequency. One night I stayed awake until 4 a.m. for it, coffee mug full of cold coffee, eyes burning from the dim light of my bedside lamp. Nothing. The next night it began at 2:03 a.m. 32 beats. Pause. 32 more. I counted out loud under my breath, voice shaking with each final set. I felt silly. I felt as if I were being watched, as if my awareness of this thump was provoking it. In February, I witnessed the curtain movement. Just once. On the bedroom window of the house next door, where the curtains were always closed, always white, and always still, there was a jerk inward, as if someone had pulled it aside and let it drop too quickly, the fabric slapping back into place. I was standing at our kitchen sink, washing a mug, when I noticed the motion out of the corner of my eye, the water going cold in my hands as I froze. No face, no figure, just the fabric moving and settling back into place. I stood there 10 minutes, staring hard enough to make my eyes water. That's it. I told Karen when she came home from her shift. She looked out the window, and there was nothing, and she said, "Maybe it was the wind." It was not windy that night. I checked the weather app. Calm. 0 miles per hour gusts. The weather app, too, seemed to be lying. Then I began to observe the house more consciously, not to the point where it became an obsession, not at least in the beginning, just casual peeks as I put out the trash, as I cut the grass, as I backed out of the driveway on my way to work. I never noticed anyone entering or exiting. No delivery men ringing the doorbell. No Amazon trucks parked out front. No guests parking and ringing the doorbell. The porch light was the only one that turned on and off, and it was on a timer and turned on at dusk and off at dawn every day without fail, casting a weak circle on the concrete that never held a shadow. The garbage bins on the other side of the house never got moved out to the curb on collection day. The recycle bin remained empty, without a bottle or can clinking inside. The grass never grew long enough to need cutting, but never looked as if it had just been cut either. Always precisely 2 inches long and emerald green, even in the dead of winter when our grass turned brown and spotty. I began to time my walks to hit sunset just right, and stand out front and see if the porch light turned on at precisely the same moment every day. It did, 6:47 p.m. sharp, like clockwork. In March, I left a note. That's it. Folded on printer paper, stuck to their mailbox with packing tape to protect it from the weather. Hi neighbors. We've lived next door for years and haven't had a chance to say hello. If you're ever free for coffee or just want to say hi, we'd love to meet you. Milton and Karen, 1427. I signed it with my best handwriting, nice and clean. I stuck it to their eye level so it couldn't be missed. Then I watched from our living room window while taping it, the street empty, the air calm. Nothing moved next door. Then I went inside. The note stayed there for 3 days, bobbing in a breeze but holding tight. Then on the 4th day, it vanished. No note slipped under our door. No knock on our door with a smile and a hand to shake. No wave from their porch. Nothing. The mailbox remained empty, as if the note never existed at all. The thump was louder that night. Not significantly, perhaps 22 decibels, but enough that Karen shifted position in the bed next to me, her chest rising and falling for a moment as she caught her breath, and then lay still again, her back turned to me. The next morning she said, "I could have sworn I heard something last night." I asked her what, and she said, "Oh, probably just the house settling, or maybe the wind blowing through the vents." She did not look at me while she spoke, her gaze fixed on the coffee machine as it bubbled along. I began taping audio recordings on my cell phone. Each evening, I placed it under my nightstand, pressed record, went to sleep, or at least pretended to. Then, in the morning, I listened, using my headphones, fast-forwarding past the hours of nothing. But there was always the thump in most recordings, a low, steady pulse, 32 beats, pause, 32 more. Except some nights there was not. Nights when there was only silence, or perhaps the soft buzz of the refrigerator in the next room, downstairs. I cross-checked these against my journal entries. These nights when there was no thump were also nights when the porch light in the next house remained off an additional hour past dawn, shining softly until 7:12 a.m., when it would cut off at 6:47 a.m. I do not know why that was important, except that it was, like a piece of a puzzle I never asked to solve. So in April, I decided to go for the direct method. I walked over at 7 p.m. That's when regular people get home from their jobs, start cooking dinner, watch TV, and streetlights are first humming to life. I rang the bell. No answer. I rang it again. Still no answer. I knocked. 3 polite raps that resonated off the vinyl siding. Complete silence. I waited 5 minutes, tapping one foot impatiently, then headed back home. That evening, the thump kicked in at 1:52 a.m. 32 pulses. Pause. 32 more. Then, for the first time, a series of 3. 96 in total. I counted them twice to make sure, my own breathing in time with the thump, until I felt lightheaded. Karen began sleeping in the guest room, for better sleep. The bed was too congested, she said, and I was tossing too much in my sleep. I didn't disagree. I didn't want to confess that the thud was louder on my side of the wall, that I could feel it in my pillow, in my teeth, a tremor that harmonized with my own beat. I began sleeping on the couch with the TV on a low volume, just enough to muffle the beat. It didn't work. The thud sliced through the conversations of the TV shows with the force of a knife, as if the dialogue was layered with the countdown in my head. It was May when I first noticed the smell, not potent, not consistent. More of a hint of metal, a coppery scent that carried over the fence when the wind was just right, like old money or dried blood on a kitchen counter. It was strongest near where our side gates were shared, but had always been locked shut by a rusty hinge that creaked when the wind was at the wrong angle. I asked Karen about it one day when we were weeding our garden. "Smell that smell?" I asked. She tilted her head, took a deep sniff. "Nope. Maybe it's from our watering system or another house's fertilizer." I sniffed again when I was alone, and could smell it again, this time stronger and almost bitter, stinging my eyes when I was downwind of it. I showed it to Google. Metallic smell from neighbor's yard gave me results on high mineral content irrigation water, fertilizer runoff, and dead animals rotting under decks. Nothing accounted for why it was always strongest on Tuesdays and Fridays when the thud was loudest, or why it seemed to oscillate with a rhythm that was always in time with the vibration I could feel humming through the soil when I was down on my knees with my hand flat against the grass. I stopped sleeping. Not all at once, just less and less. 2 hours, 3, 4 if I was lucky, and the thump skipped a night. I started taking naps in my car during lunch at school, parked in a secluded spot, windows cracked, seat reclined, engine turned off to conserve gas. Students noticed I was sleeping, or at least I could tell they thought I was. My eyes bloodshot, my lectures just a little fuzzy at the edges. I told them I was grading finals late at night. They nodded, like they understood, but I caught them exchanging their glances when I turned to write on the blackboard. In June, Karen told us that we had to talk. She called me to sit down at the kitchen table after dinner, hands together in that nurse-like way, voice steady, just the way she does when she has to tell some family in the emergency room some bad news. "You're not yourself," she said. "You're not sleeping. You're jumpy. You're staring at that house like it's going to do something to us. It's not good for you." I tried to tell her about it. The thud, the empty mailbox, the curtain twitch, the note that just seemed to disappear, the scent that pulsed, the pattern that no one else seemed to see. She listened, her face impassive, her eyes drifting to the house, her reflection in the glass making it hard to tell what she was thinking. "I haven't heard anything," she said. "I haven't smelled anything. I haven't seen anything. And I don't think you have either. Not really." She paused, her voice softening just enough to sting. "I think you need to see someone, not because you're crazy, because you're suffering." She said suffering like it was a medical term, clinical, unemotional. I agreed to a session. The therapist was kind and middle-aged and wore cardigans even in summer. Her office smelled of lavender from a diffuser in the corner. I left out the part about the third series of beats and how the pauses were like breathing. I didn't want to sound crazy. The therapist listened and nodded and asked about stress at work and about my sleep patterns and about my writing, which had come to nothing. The therapist gave me anti-anxiety medication and advised me to journal my thoughts instead of recording the neighbor's house. I went to fill the prescription. I did not take the medication. I bought a new journal. I put this one in my desk at school. That way, it was out of Karen's reach. The thump evolved in July. There were no longer just the beats. There was a brief moment of silence after each 8th beat. Brief, as if the breath were being held and then released. 32 became 4 eighths, each one ending with that brief moment of silence that felt as if it were waiting for something, for anything, from my lungs as well. I found myself counting the pauses instead of the beats. There were always 4 of them. Karen moved some of her clothes to the guest room closet. She said it was for convenience. The main closet was too cramped. She said that she enjoyed the quiet in the room. I did not argue with her. The guest room was farther away from the shared wall. In August, I returned home from school to find that the side gate was open. The rusty hinge was holding by a single screw, the gate itself hanging open wide toward their yard, creaking gently in the wind. I stood there for a long time, staring into the thin strip of space between our houses. The grass was perfectly manicured. The concrete path was clean, devoid of weeds. Their backyard wall was featureless, devoid of any windows on this side of the house. Nothing else. No tools left out in the yard. No toys scattered about. No evidence of life or activity. I closed the gate. The hinge screw was loose and bent, so I rested a brick against it and entered the house, my heart pounding a little too quickly in my chest. But this thump was different. Slower, heavier, as if it were dragging itself across the floor, one pull at a time, the scrape grinding through the wall like fingernails on chalkboard, but deeper, more primal. Not 32, but one long scrape, one pause, one scrape, one pause. It continued for 20 minutes. Then Karen emerged from the guest room, hair disheveled, eyes wide in the hall light. "What's that?" she whispered, her voice shaking just enough to make me question whether she was playing me. "I don't know," I told her, trying to keep my voice steady. She listened in the hall, hand on the wall, feeling the vibrations. Then it ceased. She returned to bed, the door closing behind her with a sharp click. The next morning, the gate was closed. The brick was missing. It was as if it never existed. The latch was rusted shut once again, just like before. The screw was straight and upright. I pushed on it. It didn't move. I didn't go to therapy any longer. I let the doctor know that I was feeling better and that the medication was working. I wasn't taking them, but she didn't need to know that. She smiled and told me to call her if I changed my mind. Then came September. School was in session again. I taught my classes in a trance, words spilling out of me by rote, faces blurring together into one. I began forgetting little things too, names, deadlines, where I'd left my keys. The kids noticed that I was quieter, farther away. I told them I'd come down with a cold that wouldn't go away. They were understanding, but the principal summoned me into his office for a talk about remaining engaged. But the thump never ceased. It varied in rhythm sometimes, but it never ceased. Some nights it came fast, almost frantically, as if it had to complete an urgent task before it could rest. Some nights it came so slowly that I could time the beat of my own heart between drags, the intervals stretching out so long that I could swear it had ceased, only to startle back into motion with a jerk that made me wince in surprise. I gave up trying to record it. The phone always picked up nothing, or static that wasn't present when I listened live. But in October, there was just one envelope in our mailbox. No postage, no address, just our names scribbled on it in handwriting that was almost mine but not quite. Loops on the M and K a little too round, T a little too straight, as if it was something someone had practiced but gotten wrong. There was one sheet of paper inside. Typed. One sentence. "Stop listening." I showed it to Karen. She read it, folded it up nice, and put it in the junk drawer where the old batteries and twist ties live. "Kids," she said, "or some nut on the street playing a prank." She didn't look sure, her eyes darting to the wall for just a beat too long. The thud was quiet that night. Completely. For the first time in well over a year, the wall was quiet. I lay awake listening for it, every sound in the house putting me on edge. But nothing. I didn't sleep. The quiet was louder than the sound. The next morning, Karen was nowhere to be found. Not gone. Gone. Just nowhere to be found. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Her phone was on the counter in the kitchen, the screen dark. A note on the fridge, scribbled in her handwriting. "Went for a walk. Back soon." She didn't return by noon. I tried calling her phone. The phone rang on the counter, the vibration humming through the granite. I walked the neighborhood, looking down the side streets, calling out for her. No sign of her. I tried calling the hospital. She wasn't scheduled. I tried calling her sister. Nobody had heard from her. And by nightfall, I was pacing, the house feeling too big and too empty, as if the walls were closing in. Then, at 2:17 a.m., the thud resumed, slower than ever before. One scrape. Pause. Then another scrape. Pause. I pressed my ear against the wall. The hum was different, higher, as if a voice struggled to speak, a burble beneath the scrape and drag. I stood there until dawn, listening for the pauses, my breath fogging the paint on the wall. Karen came home at 7:42 a.m. She was looking tired but calm, her hair a little messed up from the wind. She explained that she had taken a long walk and had fallen asleep on a bench 2 miles away. She also said that she had not brought her cell phone charger and that her cell phone had died. She apologized to me with an even voice and a steady gaze. She kissed me on the cheek and went to shower, and the shower was on longer than usual. I didn't bring up the note on the fridge. It was replaced with a grocery list when I checked again. The thump hasn't let up since. It quickens now. It's nearly insistent. 32 pulses. Pause. 32 more. Pause. 4 pauses. 4 sets. 416 each night. I counted last night. I counted the night before. I count every night until the rhythm seeps into my head, until all I hear is the beat, even in the quiet of day. I do not sleep. I sit on the couch with the television muted. I watch the clock. The numbers tick by like a reproach. I listen for the wall. I wait for the arrival of the next envelope. I wait for Karen to look at me the way she did before. I wait for her to stop looking at me with that faint air of calculation in her eyes. I wait for the scrape to produce a word I can decipher. It's not the sound, though. That's the most chilling part. It's the way Karen sings now in the kitchen, the humming in time with the thump beat, her back to me as if I weren't even in the room. It's the way the side gate swings open some mornings just a little ways, beckoning me to peer out to see what's on the other side. It's the way the mailbox next door is finally full, just one envelope in it, the same one we have in our junk drawer, but I haven't had the nerve to claim it yet. I wait for the moment it will stop. Because when it stops, I think I will understand what happens next. But I think I'll wish it hadn't. The worst of it is, I believe that deep down Karen already knows. And she's waiting as well. To wait for me to finish listening,